Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the debrief for the 2019 Russian Grand Prix. So, I didn't have high expectations when going into the weekend, but then again, I never really do when it comes to Russia. However, it wasn't an awful race, and if nothing else, it gave us one pretty major talking point. Before I get onto any of that though, let's start by having a look at the race result. Lewis Hamilton took victory in Sochi ahead of teammate Valtteri Bottas, with Charles Leclerc rounding off that podium for Ferrari. What could have been? Max Verstappen 4th for Red Bull with teammate Alex Albon behind him 5th, Carlos Sainz 6th and Sergio Perez in 7th. And then the final points paying positions went to Lando Norris in 8th, Kevin Magnussen 9th and Nico Hülkenberg in 10th. Lance Stroll just missed out on a point in 11th place with Daniel Kvyat 12th and Kimi Raikkonen 13th. And the final two classified finishers were Pierre Gasly and Antonio Giovinazzi, with Robert Kubica, George Russell, Sebastian Vettel, Daniel Ricciardo and Romain Grosjean all retiring from the race. All of that means that Lewis Hamilton extends his championship lead over Valtteri Bottas, and we could see that title wrapped up very soon. Charles Leclerc remains in 3rd place now with a 3-point lead over Max Verstappen in 4th, and Sebastian Vettel sits 5th on 194 points. Pierre Gasly just remains best of the rest, if you like, in 6th place with Carlos Sainz just 3 behind now in 7th. And then it's Alex Albon in 8th on 52 points, Lando Norris 9th on 35 points. And Daniel Ricciardo rounds out the top 10 on 34, but teammate Nico Hülkenberg is also on 34 points, just behind in 11th place. Mercedes remain top of the Constructors' Championship on 571 points, with Ferrari 2nd on 409 and Red Bull 3rd on 311. I think that fight for 2nd is probably over now. McLaren tick over the 100 points barrier to 101 now in 4th place, and that's looking pretty solid for them as well. Renault 5th on 68, Toro Rosso sits 6th on 55, it's 7th for Racing Point on 52, and then it's Alfa Romeo 35 points for them in 8th place, Haas have got 28 points in 9th, and Williams still have that 1 point for 10th place. Right, let's go through these teams then, and I'm going to pull Mercedes and Ferrari together because, well, let's be honest, one team's race certainly had an impact on both teams' races. So, Ferrari, yeah, it was all looking so good for them after Sebastian Vettel had made his way past Lewis Hamilton off the line and then took advantage of that toe down to turn 2 to make his way past teammate Charles Leclerc to take the lead. Surely another Ferrari 1-2 was on the cards. No. Before too long, the team were on the radio asking Vettel to return the position to Leclerc, and it later came to light that there was a pre-race agreement that Charles would help Seb by giving him the toe to help in the fight with Mercedes down to turn 2, and to be fair, it worked. I'm not going to go over the whole thing because I'll be here all week, but the short story is that Ferrari asked Vettel to let Leclerc through. The German responded by saying that his teammate needed to close the gap, and also suggested that they left it a few laps while they build a gap back to Hamilton. Leclerc was told over team radio that the swap would come later, and he stated on more than one occasion that he understood and respected the call, although, as we discussed last night, the tone of his voice when delivering that message certainly told a different story. But anyway, Ferrari switched to plan C and ended up undercutting Vettel through the stops with Leclerc. And that is something that Mattia Binotto has since said was not a deliberate move. I'll let you make your own minds up on that one. Frankly, just an absolute mess in the end. And it didn't get any better because shortly after his pit stop, Vettel pulled over to retire with an MGU-K issue, and that in turn resulted in a virtual safety car, which allowed Mercedes to pit both of their drivers without losing too much time, and they returned to the track 1 and 3 with Leclerc later pitting under a full safety car, leaving Mercedes running 1 and 2, which they held on to compound Ferrari's misery further. Basically, the Scuderia shot themselves in the foot at every given opportunity, or at least that's how it felt. That right there was the short story, apparently, but I'm guessing you're really here for my opinion on it all, so here goes. Ferrari overcomplicated a situation that wasn't complicated at all, or certainly didn't need to be complicated. Yeah, Leclerc kept his car to the left, allowing Vettel to get a bigger benefit from the toe, and to be fair to him, he didn't go to defend his position, so he kept his side of the bargain, and perhaps Vettel should have kept his. And by the way, he has since said that he did stick to his side of the bargain, but anyway, in that regard, Leclerc's frustration is understandable, but here's the problem. First of all, I'm fairly sure that Seb would have been able to pick up the toe even if Leclerc didn't help him. He got a better start than Hamilton and was already past him before that turn 1 kink. And even though Vettel and Leclerc got pretty much identical starts from what I've seen anyway, Seb will have been able to close in and probably take the lead by turn 2. And that's even if Leclerc does dive to the inside to defend. The momentum would have been with Vettel. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. I suppose the point is Vettel didn't necessarily need an agreement for the toe. He would have probably ended up alongside his teammate anyway. Secondly, and probably more importantly, Vettel was quicker, end of. He'd built a solid buffer back to his teammate and was setting faster laps consistently through those first few laps, and if Seb had backed off to let Charles go at that point, he would have lost a huge chunk of time to Hamilton, and that would have left him vulnerable. The fact of the matter is, if Leclerc wanted that position back, he needed to be right on Seb's backside, matching him for pace, and he wasn't. And I do think that Vettel would have let him through had that been the case. And do you know what? The more I think about it, I feel like that's the experience of a 4-time world champion showing. He could see that threat from Lewis if they kept messing about and ended up swapping positions at the wrong point in the race. And let's not forget, this was all happening inside the first 10 laps. I mean, come on, at least let the race unfold a bit before worrying about swapping positions. Obviously, this bit is with the benefit of hindsight, but it was all academic in the end because Vettel retired. Again, they weren't to know that at the time, but the point I'm making is just leave it and see where things are with 20 laps to go or something like that, and then make the decision. Not on lap 4 or whatever it was. As I said earlier, just overcomplicating something that didn't need to be complicated. Oh, and yes, just quickly, because I'm pretty sure somebody will make the point in the comment section. No, I do not for 1 second think that Ferrari deliberately switched off Vettel's engine. And no, I do not believe Seb deliberately pulled over to trigger a virtual safety car, as some have claimed. That is just utter nonsense. I mean, it is interesting the way that some people think, but come on, they are just ridiculous claims. What are Ferrari ever going to gain from that? All of that had a huge impact on Mercedes' race, but I have to say, although there is a big slice of luck involved, it's not fair to say that it all came down to luck. Merck took the decision in qualifying to go a different way on strategy to Ferrari and start both drivers on the medium tyres. That meant they could run longer into the race, and it gave them the opportunity to capitalise on any virtual or full course safety car, knowing full well that there was a high probability we would see at least one in Sochi. Had they not done that and followed Ferrari and started on the softs, they may have already pitted either because of degradation or trying to perform the undercut before the safety car was deployed. Again, yeah, you can't argue there was a huge element of luck, but they put themselves in a position both with strategy and by keeping themselves within Ferrari's safety car window to take advantage of the VSC and jump Leclerc. It all goes back to Saturday and what was a very smart call from the Silver Arrows. As I touched on earlier, Leclerc pitted when the full safety car was put out, and I fully expected him to cruise up to the back of Bottas and take second back, especially when you consider the straight line speed of that car. But much to my surprise and many others as well, he wasn't able to get past Bottas, and Valtteri once again did an excellent job at keeping that Ferrari behind him and helping the team secure an unexpected, I think it's fair to say, 1-2 finish. I don't really have too much to add on either of their races because it was one of those days where it all came down to strategy, keeping themselves in the game, and a slice of luck as well. Both Hamilton and Bottas, though, did do their part in what was, again, a very well-executed strategy. And thanks to that and their teamwork through the rest of this season, they can now officially wrap up the Constructors' Championship next time out in Japan. Look, I'm going to move on because we talked loads about this last night and I don't want this to dominate the video. Yeah, it was the big talking point, but I've got 8 other teams to get through. But between last night's stream and this video, I think I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to say. But if I have missed anything, I can only apologise and I might revisit it all in a future stream or something like that. But it's time to run through the rest of the field, starting with Red Bull and what was a pretty good day of damage limitation for them. In fact, thanks to Vettel's retirement, they picked up more points than they were probably expecting, certainly pre-race. Max Verstappen started back in 9th place after taking a 5-place grid drop after quali thanks to a new ICE, and he did a solid job to recover as well. Maybe not as impressive as his drive from the back of the grid last year, but still he did some really good overtaking, took advantage of the VSC to make his stop, although he didn't get the full benefit from that because he was still in the pits when it ended, but it certainly didn't hurt him. Max said that there wasn't much going on for him once he'd made his way through the field and conceded that they just did not have the pace in the car to challenge Mercedes and Ferrari. He may have had a shot towards the end at passing Leclerc after the full safety car was deployed, but that was one of the reasons why Ferrari called Charles in, that threat from Verstappen. He believes, though, that 4th was the maximum he could take away from the race, and that's very much my take on it all as well. Despite the pace he showed on Friday, I didn't see Red Bull worrying the top 2 realistically. For me, even if they'd started in a normal, if you like, position, they would probably have ended up 5th and 6th at best. So I think Verstappen could be very happy with 4th, and I think the team could be happy with 4th and 5th. Like I say though, some really solid damage limitation, and once again, another very good drive from Max Verstappen. Alex Albon also delivered a super drive, making his way up to 5th place after starting in the pit lane. Yeah, alright, he got a slice of luck thanks to that safety car, and that's something he alludes to in his post-race quotes. But like I said about Mercedes, he and the team put themselves in the position to capitalise, so credit where credit is due. He did though spend a long time stuck behind the Toro Rosso boys, but following other cars is hard enough at most tracks, yet it seems to be worse at Sochi than some other tracks. I mean, to be fair, you would expect a driver in a top 3 car to make their way through the field if they'd started out of position, but he pulled off some properly good and aggressive overtakes, and that's something Gasly wasn't doing in that car, so I think Alex is doing himself the world of good in that fight to be Verstappen's teammate next season. I'm just going to say quickly, by the way, that move on Gasly on lap 25 was nice. Up the inside of turn 3, Gasly held it around the outside and Albon finished it off around the outside of turn 4. I loved that. All in all, though, another strong and mature drive from Albon, and like I say, he could already be on for that seat next year. Maybe jumping the gun a little bit, but that decision is only a few weeks away. I'm not going to lie, running through the midfield is going to be a bit tougher this week, and I'm probably going to have to go off some of the team's press releases because TV direction was, well, quite frankly, pretty poor again. Carlos Sainz was brilliant all weekend, and right at the start of the race, he was even running third for a split second as he went toe-to-toe with Lewis Hamilton, which was awesome to watch. Not often these days we get to see McLaren versus Mercedes, which was kind of apt yesterday, even if it was only for the run to turn 2. He did also do a good job at keeping Bottas behind for the first 6 or 7 laps. Sainz ran a solid pace all afternoon and never really looked under threat apart from the Red Bulls making their way past as they recovered, but he maintained a decent gap to those behind and brought home some really big points. Can he make that top 6 before the end of the season? Just 3 points in it, as I said earlier, and that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Great weekend from Sainz. Lando Norris also raced well, but was a bit unlucky with the timing of the virtual safety car. That ended up putting him behind some slower cars and compromised his afternoon overall. But he did a really good job at fending off Nico Hülkenberg in the fight for what was 9th at the time, but obviously became 8th after Magnussen's penalty. I mean, I'm only honestly going off what I saw when I was watching the timing screens during yesterday's watch-along, but Hülkenberg was consistently within about 6/10 of him for a good few laps. It would have been quite nice to watch that, but there we go. Just another really good weekend though for McLaren, and that's on track and off track. Sergio Perez did what Sergio Perez does, and he described his race post-race as, quote, "one of my greatest races that I can remember." That is quite a claim. He was another one who was a bit unlucky with the safety car timing, but he was able to recover that time, and in the end was just 2.8 seconds behind Sainz in 6th, although Carlos was quicker in the closing stages, but still. I wasn't overly impressed with the quali pace of that Racing Point, but its race pace was far better, and that 7th place was thoroughly deserved. Great effort from Checo. It was a frustrating end to what looked like a really positive day for Lance Stroll, but he did say post-race that he was struggling with the balance of the car and spent most of the day stuck in traffic. He made yet another really strong start, that's one thing he always seems to get right, and was, I'd say, possibly on for a points finish. However, with the safety car allowing the cars around him to pit for fresher tyres, it left him vulnerable, and ultimately he ended up losing out to Nico Hülkenberg, but did still finish within a second of the Renault. So although it was only 11th and not a point, he was right in the fight to the end. It was a mixed day for Haas, which is still a better result than the last couple of weekends, let's be quite honest about that. Kevin Magnussen, he was miffed after the stewards slapped him with a time penalty for failing to rejoin the track correctly at turn 2. Basically, he didn't go to the left of the white bollards and only rejoined to the left of the orange or yellow bollards or whatever bollard. But K-Mag thought it was all a load of bollards. Rules are rules though, and as we saw in F2, they are there for a reason and should be followed. So although frustrating for K-Mag, I do agree with the stewards on that one. Overall though, I think he should be happy with his performance because he did pick up points and that car was quicker than probably even they were expecting. And it is a big step up from where they've been at times this year. Romain Grosjean had a short race, finding himself in the wall at turn 4 on the first lap. Gro was to the left, Giovinazzi was in the middle, and Ricciardo was to the right. The three of them all converged on the corner at the same point, and to take a Martin Brundle line, 3 into 1 doesn't go. The three collided, leaving Grosjean in the wall, Ricciardo with a puncture, but Gio did keep going. No penalty was given, and it was deemed a racing incident. I think that's fair. It was another one of those first lap things, and something we're going to see in wheel-to-wheel racing. It was a shame for Grosjean though, because he had been surprisingly quick all weekend, and based on the race pace of K-Mag, he could well have been in the fight for points. Nico Hülkenberg, as already touched on twice, managed to nick that final point for Renault. He actually seemed to be the source of much of the action we did see in the midfield, and his move on Perez into turn 13 was one of the few midfield moments that actually made the highlights on YouTube. And it was a good move. I mean, overtakes in turn 4 and turn 13 always look fairly spectacular. I think it's because of the sweeping runs that come just before the braking zones on both of those corners. Really good move from Nico. He wasn't happy overall though, saying post-race that everything went against him, including, quote, a poor start, a slow pit stop and an unfortunate VSC timing. Hülkenberg also went on to say that he believed that the car deserved more than just 10th place. 10th place though, and 1 point was more than his teammate ended up with. As already covered, he was involved in that first lap collision with Grosjean and Giovinazzi, and the damage from that, which included some hefty damage to his floor, forced him into retirement. Not much more to say on that, or Renault for that matter. Down at Toro Rosso, it wasn't the best of days, but they were on the back foot with both drivers right from the off. Daniel Kvyat had the most miserable of home Grand Prix, having taken a load of engine penalties prior to the weekend, not being allowed to run his special helmet despite other drivers being able to run 2, 3, 4 helmets a season, but anyway. And then after more power unit issues in practice, he had to take even more penalties. That left him right at the back of the grid, and it was always going to be tough from there. Kvyat, though, was, to be fair, quite happy with what he called, quote, a strong and competitive race, and he wasn't actually all that far away from picking up a point, 2.5 seconds in the end. So given everything he'd been through at the weekend and where he started, that's not too bad at all. Pierre Gasly says that he didn't think the pace was there to fight for points. One thing he did have in the race, though, was a good scrap with his teammates, including a super late braking attempt at getting past into turn 2. He threw it up the inside, went in far too hot, locked up, and had to go through those bollards to rejoin the track. Not a great weekend for Toro Rosso, and already all eyes are going to be on Suzuka for Red Bull, Toro Rosso as well, and Honda. It wasn't a great day, was it, for Alfa at all? Kimi Raikkonen jumped the start, and although he did stop before the lights went out, that is a penalty all day long. It's always going to be, and he was handed a drive-through penalty for it. That was, though, pretty much it for him all race, because the pace to mount a recovery just didn't seem to be there. And as you'd probably expect, Kimi didn't have an awful lot to say after the race in a post-race press release either. I don't need to say any more on that incident on the first lap that involved Antonio Giovinazzi. He said the car never really felt right again after that contact, and he did also have to pit for a new nose after the collision. So yeah, that was pretty much it for him as well. On Gio though, he can take some positives from the weekend, more specifically the fact he managed to outqualify his teammate again. I'm going to say it for the millionth time in the last 2 weeks. As this season progresses, he is definitely improving. And last up, surprise, surprise, it's Williams. Neither driver finished the race, giving them their first double DNF of the season. George Russell was running well, and Robert Kubica pitted twice under the safety car as the team tried something different with the strategy. But an issue with his car saw Russell lock up and hit the wall, and that was the crash, by the way, that brought out the full course safety car. Now, there has been some speculation about what happened to Russell, with some saying it could have been the brakes, but at time of recording and according to the team's press release, they are still just describing it as, quote, an issue, which again, quote, caused George to lock a front wheel. The team then took the decision to retire Kubica to conserve parts ahead of the flyaway races. Yet another indication of the mess that Williams find themselves in, and the strain that these ridiculously extended calendars have on the teams with smaller budgets. Kubica was far from happy in interviews he did post-race and described it as, quote, the worst weekend of my career. Later elaborating on that to say that the car was nearly undrivable in FP1 and that, and again I will quote him here, I don't need special help, I just need a tool which is working and I think then I can drive well. A lot of totally understandable frustration from Kubica there. Again, sorry if that run through the teams was a bit scripted and not very opinionated. It is all well and good wanting to go through all the teams in these debriefs, but when the TV direction gives you next to nothing in terms of midfield focus, then I've got to rely on press releases from the midfield teams, which is a shame because things did seem to be improving, but that's just the way it is really. I mean, I get that they wanted to focus on the team radio between the Ferraris, but that's just audio. Could they not have played that whilst watching some of the overtaking further down the field, although that might confuse some people, apparently. Anyway, moan over. All in all, it wasn't a bad race and there was plenty of intrigue there, but equally, it's not a race I'm going to be rushing to watch again. That is it then for the Russian Grand Prix debrief, but there is another poll behind the eye at the top right of the screen where you can rate the race. And you can also let me know your thoughts on the weekend down in the comment section. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can follow me over on social media and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.